Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 487. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. I got a lot of news to talk about in today's show. I am going to be breaking down the bombing of the Baptist hospital in Gaza, explaining what, the speculation is, what I think happened there, and, how it could impact the war going forward, and then a ton of other news about the wars in both Israel and Ukraine. So thank you all so much for tuning into today's show. And if you can, just share it somewhere. I posted at the Libertarian Institute on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version. It's up anywhere you could listen to audio podcast. There is the Twitter handle for the show is at @con_interest. You can follow me on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_. And then I also have an Instagram at KyleAnzalone3. And you can find me on Facebook as well, where I'm pretty good about posting everything I write. So let's get into today's show. I actually, kind of delayed starting today's show just because I wasn't sure and want to get all the information I possibly could about the bombing or, whatever, however you want to describe it, whatever happened at the Baptist hospital. And so, there is this picture here, and for anybody watching the video version of the show, I actually have a tweet here from Naftali Bennett, who is the former prime minister of Israel, and he's, rebuking the New York Times. But these are three different headlines. So the initial headline for the story is Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. And then they changed that to at least 500 dead in strikes on Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. And then finally, at least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. And so, I have actually seen, this is one of the wild things, this very exact same picture here of the three headlines used by supporters and advocates of Palestinians, and the same on the Israeli side, as basically arguments for the New York Times pushing propaganda, where the Palestinians are anybody who unbiased people too, kind of feel, I think, that the New York Times over time adopted their headline to be more friendly to Israel, while Israel says that, look how reactionarily pro-Palestinian the New York Times was, and how irresponsible this was that they had to go through and make these significant revisions to their headline twice. Now, this is one of the things that does just generally really present a problem with online media, is how, you could significantly change the headline of an article, significantly impact what 80% of the people who just read the headlines are going to take from that article. And, it's not clear to a lot of people that that's going on or that's happening. So, but that's a separate issue with journalism. And so, this has created a lot of controversy and a lot of debate about what really happened. And so the first question, I guess, is, the number of dead. Initially, the report was 200 to 300, and then then it was revised to an estimate of 500. And today, the Palestinians are reporting that there are 471 dead with 28 in critical condition. So that 500 estimate was apparently right on, at least according to the Palestinian, sources. Of course, it's always possible that they're lying about the number of dead, but looking at, the different photos and press conferences that have come out, I wouldn't be surprised that was that number was accurate. It seems to me to be very possible. Now, the one thing, as daylight has come up, there's a lot of pictures coming out, and it looks like it was more like the courtyard parking lot area of the Baptist hospital. So there does seem to be, buildings all side. And if you look at pictures from earlier in the day, there were a lot of people out here. But so initially, when you hear 500 people dead in a strike on a hospital, you assume that a large portion or a building. Hospitals, usually have like multiple buildings on their campuses, and parking garages, administrative buildings, doctors' offices, where they had the ER, oncology ward, and all those kinds of things, right? Like it's not like one single building, so you don't expect the whole hospital to be destroyed, but maybe a significant chunk of it missing. But it looks like this strike was in the courtyard area, and so some people are saying that there's no way that 500 people were killed just based on the picture and the damages there. If you want to, go look at that, you can. And certainly everybody's willing to have their own opinions and draw their own conclusions, but I do think if you kind of look at what has happened during the Israeli bombing campaign of Gaza, people have flooded schools and hospitals, and I'm sure there's a lot of orphan children or children who just lost contact with their parents in all the chaos, parents who are severely injured got transported to a hospital, kids don't know where they are. And so it seemed like there were particularly a lot of children in this courtyard, but just, a lot of people there who are probably sleeping, camping out there, just trying to figure out what, their next move is, as there's multiple evacuation orders. Now, in the lead up here, Israel did threaten to bomb this hospital and issued evacuation orders for this hospital. So, and that's something that you could confirm. You could see Doctors Without Border Twitter accounts from 4 or 5 days ago saying that it was completely unacceptable that Israel had given them that evacuation order. And of course, this hospital is in the northern half of Gaza, which has been given a total evacuation order by Israel. Now, you would assume that, particularly with a hospital and in a war zone where a lot of roads have been destroyed, there's not a lot of medical facilities anywhere in Gaza. And so, to evacuate a hospital, it would probably take weeks, if not a month, to do so in a way where nobody is going to die in transportation here. You think of, there's probably now a whole lot of ambulances in Gaza. They probably can't travel very quickly on the roads. You have people who are on, various medical devices that they need to survive. And so, being able to not only coordinate that travel, but then have somewhere for them to go to, a hospital for them, bed for them to move into, are logistical things that take a lot of time, particularly in war zones. And so, maybe there's a lot of people kind of hanging around the hospital trying to coordinate moving their loved ones south, or again, maybe people who had their homes destroyed, they're just looking for somewhere generally safe to sleep, or people that are maybe trying to find information out about a loved one that they believe maybe was killed or something about that. So let's see, what else do I have on my list here? So as far as I could tell, the only confirmed video of the strike is one that the Washington Post confirmed, and you can hear something, whistling by, and then an explosion. And so it is, apparently the Washington Post was able to confirm it. I suspect, they're not lying about that, but I really don't know for sure. Assuming that video is correct, there's a lot of speculation that this would indicate that it was an Israeli missile of some type, judging by the sound of the missile, and, how quick it would be traveling. It would mean it probably wasn't, and the size of the explosion would all suggest that it wasn't a Palestinian rocket. Now, the Israeli side has put out several videos that have either been, I guess, that have been debunked, is the way you would put it. They've, claimed that, these are videos that show the Palestinians launching rockets, those rockets being intercepted, and those rockets falling, crashing, malfunctioning, whatever, and, hitting the hospital. From what I've been able to kind of go through and dig through, like the Israeli accounts have actually had to edit out and delete some of these videos because they've been confirmed to be from 2022, earlier in the war or after the strike. It looks like, based on what the Israelis are trying to put forward, they're trying to claim the strike happened about a half hour after it did, and that's how they're trying to use some of these videos of an alleged missile launched not by Hamas, by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and claiming that caused the bombing of the hospital. Now, I can't say for 100% sure that it wasn't a malfunctioned rocket fired by some Palestinian fighting force. However, given the Israeli warnings, given the fact that Israel has already bombed hospitals in Gaza, and kind of how this all played out, I really don't think it was a Palestinian rocket. I do think it was an Israeli strike. Now, again, like, go back to the damage to the courtyard that we were talking about a little bit earlier. People again are speculating that due to the lack of the damage in the courtyard, there not being a massive crater, this would suggest that it was a Palestinian rocket and not a Israeli bomb. But that is, and people post pictures of craters caused by bunker busting bombs, or bombs that are meant to destroy underground infrastructure, and not necessarily bombs that are meant to explode in the air. Or they're posting pictures of craters caused by 2,500-pound bombs, when it's very possible that Israel used a small air to surface missile, a 250, a 500-pound bomb to carry out this strike. They certainly have air explosive missiles. And so I don't think that any of those photos actually prove that this was in any way a Palestinian missile. And in fact, if you look at videos and results from air exploded missiles, that does kind of look like what you see on the ground there. But again, I can't say that for 100% certainty. I know everybody is really looking to say that one way or another for absolute fact. And I would say it looks like 90% sure that this was an Israeli strike to me. But I guess that this is an amount of damage that would be caused by a missile fired by Palestinian forces is possible if it hit some kind of fuel tank or something in the courtyard. Maybe, I don't know. But it's at least with not impossible that was a Palestinian missile. I guess I should say that. Now, Biden was going to Israel, and I recorded a show last night with somebody that'll be out in a couple of weeks. But on his show, he was like kind of asking me as we were wrapping up my thoughts on what was to come here, and I honestly, was kind of thinking that maybe something like this Israeli strike on this hospital would somehow damage the U.S.-Israeli relationship and make Washington hesitant to give the blank check to Tel Aviv that they've given them throughout this conflict. However, Biden was in Israel today, and he said to Netanyahu, based on the information that you've given me, it looks like it was the other team that did this, which is a really disgusting way to describe, this conflict, looking as like a football game and teams and stuff like that. But also that Biden would repeat a claim from Netanyahu after just a week ago, he repeated the claim that 40 Israeli babies were beheaded. And, he said he got this in confirmation from Tel Aviv, and then the White House had to later walk that back. And so you would think that Biden would be a little bit more skeptical here than he actually was. But, it seems like maybe he just bought anything that Netanyahu said. Of course, we know that as an old man, Biden's mental facilities aren't as high as they should be. So, maybe he just, whatever the last person said to him, he kind of believes. All right. And by the way, there's a really good piece by Kelly Blahos at the Quincy Institute, a short little write-up on this. And she points out that in the flight to Israel, in conversations with the press pool, the White House had said that they had not confirmed that this was done by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or some other, group of fighters in Israel. All right, and so now the last thing I want to, I guess, mention on this is, to some extent, is it going to matter who did this or not? If the truth doesn't come out for a couple of weeks, and in the U.S. narrative, it is established that this was a Hamas rocket and not an Israeli rocket, then by the time that the truth comes out, the outrage will have cooled off so much it probably won't have a giant impact on U.S. politics. And so, in one sense, it may not matter if Israel did it or not, if they could buy themselves enough time between the actual incident and the truth coming out. Now, if the truth comes out soon that it was Israel, then this may be a huge political miscalculation for the White House and even Netanyahu, and a lot of credibility that the media has given Tel Aviv, just because it's almost like giving somebody rope for them to hang themselves with, where it's almost worse that they would have obviously known they did it, and then they lied to everyone about it, and then they later had, not later, but almost immediately had to admit that it would look a lot worse than just coming out originally and saying, oh, it was a mistargeting, or we had to hit Hezbollah, there was like some big commander there, we couldn't take a chance of not taking him out, he was using all the people there as human shields. If you come out with that later, it's just, I think it's gonna ring pretty hollow after you make this statement. So depending on, again, how quickly the truth comes out, it may or may not have a political impact on Biden and Netanyahu. From the Palestinian side, if it did happen to be a Palestinian group where one of their missiles malfunctioned or was shot down, interfered with by Israel, if that was the case and that caused the explosion, I'm not sure how much is really going to matter for the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine. They may, first of all, never believe it. And I guess, they're just not going to see that conclusive proof. And look, a lot of Israelis will never believe unless, the Israeli government itself comes out and says that, we did it. Or, if Hamas comes out and says that we do, and neither of those things, I think, are Hamas coming out and saying they did, I think is very unlikely. Same thing with Israel, unless, maybe one of their officials are really cornered wheats in the future. So, without that admission, that the people aren't going to believe it, but also the other ramifications across the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Lebanon, Jordan, I think is going to be significant as well, where people in these countries are going to believe it was Israel, and we see major protests at American and Israeli embassies, and I'm not sure that's going to be ramped down anytime soon. Now, let's get into some actual news stories that we have here. This one written by Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. McCall preparing authorization for military force if Gaza war escalates. So this is Representative Michael McCall, a representative from Texas and the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he told CNN on Monday he was drawing up an authorization for use of military force against Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups in the region if the Gaza war escalates. I hope I never had to mark this bill up, but we have a situation in the Middle East that's growing day by day with intensity, and if Hezbollah gets involved, Iran is already threatening. If Gaza is, if Israel goes, if IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, it goes into Gaza, they are going to come out. And so what he is talking about is waging a war from, the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Iraq, at least, if not, then a direct conflict with Iran, because he's talking about here Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Iran-backed Shia militias. That would be the Shia militias in Syria and the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. And of course, these are groups that were a reaction to the American support for the Islamic State and other jihadist groups in Syria in the early 2010s in the war against Bashar al-Assad. And so, that blowback created these, that support for those terrorist groups, some of the blowback for that was that Iran created groups to counter them, and they have a lot of support in these countries because, you could hate Iran all you want, but you can't deny that Iran is better than ISIS, and certainly anybody would probably rather live in Tehran than in, say, ISIS-controlled Ramadi or Mosul. So That's pretty clear that the people of Iraq and Syria are very happy with their Shia militias, or at least, to some extent they are, and will not be happy if the U.S. goes to war against them. And I also think that this would be a death sentence for thousands of U.S. troops that are in these countries who would come under relentless rocket barrages from these groups should the U.S. start to attack Hezbollah and go to war with these Shia militias. So this is incredibly stupid and incredibly dangerous. We also had the White House discussing a military response if Hezbollah attacks Israel. The White House has discussed the possibility of using military force against Hezbollah if the Lebanese Shia group launches a significant attack on Israel. The report reveals the scenario of the U.S. using military force if Hezbollah were to join the war has come up several times in White House meetings in recent days, the official said. They added that any decision to use force would be made around the scope of Hezbollah attack and Israel's ability to respond. Hezbollah and Israel have been exchanging fire across the Lebanese-Israeli border, and there have been casualties, but the two sides have yet to engage in all-out fighting. According to the Jerusalem Post, Israel delayed its ground invasion of Gaza over concerns that Hezbollah could open up a second front in the north. The U.S. has deployed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups and other military assets to the region and has been warning Hezbollah and Iran not to intervene in the Gaza war. Israeli officials believe that the U.S. would get involved if the war escalates beyond the onslaught in Gaza. And so this is really interesting that the Biden administration, one, thinks they have authority to attack Lebanon because Lebanon attacked Israel. That would seem to be a major problem, and they would have to have Michael McCall's resolution to do that. I'm worried that they would have resounding support in the House to pass this AUMF, which really isn't the way it should be done. It should be a declaration of war, but they're certainly not going to go that far. They're going to do the minimum they can to give the White House the blank check the White House, is looking for to carry out these attacks across the Middle East. And so it's possible that, if all out war breaks out in North Israel, that, the House would pass that AUMF. But it seems here that the Biden administration is looking at, conducting an immediate response before debate or passage of the legislation in the U.S. could happen. And so that would seem to me to be really unconstitutional. And I would hope Republicans would take issue with it, but I don't think so. As I mentioned in that article, there's reports from the Jerusalem Post that Israel has delayed its invasion in Gaza over the Hezbollah potential of launching a major attack in the north. It's possible this is the case. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. There were previous reports from the New York Times that the invasion was delayed due to weather conditions. So one or both could be factors. It could also be that rather than actually deciding on a ground invasion, what the Israelis are looking to do is just carry out a massive air campaign against Gaza. Now, that would probably give a disadvantage in a couple of ways. One, you would likely kill the 200 apparently hostages that Hamas has. So that's a lot. This is closer to the number I thought. It apparently is as high as 250 people are now saying that that Hamas has that many hostages in Gaza. And so you risk killing those 250 people. You certainly aren't going to get them released, with these tactics of just carrying out the air campaign versus, a ground invasion. Maybe you're able to carry out some operations and able to free some of these people from their captives. Or, I guess you could always negotiate too. And, Hamas has said that they're willing to free the prisoners upon negotiations, particularly the end of the bombing of the region. And then the other thing, of course, with the ground invasion that Israel risks, though, is they can end up having more people taken captive. Now, I think Israel would likely win any on-ground fighting with Hamas, so I'm not, suggesting that the Israeli army is going to go in there and maybe get beaten really bad. I think they would use their air superiority to level whatever they have to. A U.S. Operation like the U.S. carried out against ISIS, where like Mosul and Raqqa, they just kind of slowly bombed the city and moved forward that way and destroyed everything. And so, I think they could have a quote unquote successful ground operation. At the same time, they could send in these troops, and at least here and there they could end up getting captured or getting killed, and then their bodies taken and held by Hamas, which could give the group more leverage in any future negotiations with Israel, and present a political problem for Israel. All right, next up here, Egypt says Israel not cooperating on delivering humanitarian aid into Gaza. Egyptian officials said Monday that Israel was not cooperating on allowing the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza, as the enclave is being pushed to the brink due to relentless Israeli airstrikes and a total siege, according to Al Jazeera, which, by the way, as of Wednesday morning, Al Jazeera no longer has press credentials in Israel, so I'm not sure exactly what that's going to mean. We will see, but they had apparently revoked, the Israeli government revoked Al Jazeera's license to operate in Israel. So anyways, according to Al Jazeera, Cairo said the Rafah border crossing that connects Egypt and Gaza has been rendered nearly inoperable due to continuous Israeli airstrikes in the area. The border crossing was closed last week as Israeli bombs fell nearby, giving Palestinians in Gaza nowhere to flee. The Egyptian foreign minister also said that Israel was not allowing citizens of other countries to exit Gaza. Until now, the Israeli government has not taken a position on opening the Rafah border crossing from the Gaza side to allow the entrance of assistance and exit of citizens of third countries. And that was a statement from the foreign minister. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed on Sunday that the Rafah border crossing will open for aid soon, but the office of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Monday that no deal has been reached. There is currently no ceasefire, no humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip in exchange for the expulsion of foreigners. Blinken was back in Israel on Monday, according to Axios, and told the Prime Minister Netanyahu that allowing aid into Gaza was vital to maintaining international support for Israelis' bombardment and expected ground invasion. And so that's kind of funny that he's like, come on, man. Like, I know that you want to be able to bomb these people to death, and so just give them a little bit of food so they can have some, food in their belly as you kill them. Israeli officials have said no humanitarian aid can enter Gaza until Hamas releases the captives it brought into the enclave. Humanitarian aid to Gaza: no electric switch will be turned on, no water tap will be opened, and no fuel truck will enter until the Israeli abductees are returned home. And that was a statement from the Israeli energy minister. Since Katz's comments, the minister's comments, Israel has turned on water for one community in South Gaza, but Hamas and other authorities inside the enclave denied having any water flowing. Gazans are resorting to drinking salty and sewage contaminated water. As of Monday night in Gaza, at least 28, so this is an old number. The number is now over 3,000, with over 1,000 children killed. Let's see. All right, next up here, the House Democrats introduced a resolution calling for a Gaza ceasefire. On Monday, a group of progressive Democrats in the House introduced a resolution calling for escalation and an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel. I am grieving for every Palestinian, Israeli, and American life lost in the violence. My heart breaks for all those who will forever be traumatized because of it. War and retaliatory violence doesn't achieve accountability or justice. It only leads to more death and human suffering. And this was a statement from Representative Cori Bush. The effort is being led by Bush and Rashida Tlaib. And then there is Andre Carson, Summer Lee, Delina Ramirez, and it has received support from Jabal Bowman, Watson Coleman, Jesus Garcia, Jonathan Jadson, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Alana Presley, and Represent Valquez. The resolution would urge the Biden administration to call for an immediate ceasefire and a ceasefire in de-escalation and a ceasefire in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, to send humanitarian aid and assistance to Gaza, and to save as many lives as possible. Amid Israel's onslaught of Gaza, which has killed now again over 3,000 people, the State Department has circulated instructions to its diplomats not to call for a ceasefire or de-escalation of the conflict. The vast majority of Congress is also strongly backing Israel and wants to pass legislation for new military aid, giving the increase the ceasefire resolution no chance of passing if brought to a vote. And so we also had the UN. U.S. allies defeat UN Security Council resolution calling for Gaza ceasefire. This wasn't a surprise really at all, but I guess it is worth noting here. There were 5 or 6 countries, China, Gabon, Mozambique, and the UAE proposed this, and I think one more country voted for it. And so, it is interesting that Russia and China are seeming to again, be opposed to what the U.S. is doing on the global stage here. And we do have Putin meeting with the Chinese leader this week. Now, the last story I have today is Israel rejects Zelensky's visit. They said the time wasn't right. This is, more an update on, something that I had been talking about on the show earlier this week or last week. I wrote an article on Zelensky wanting to visit. So just want to note that that was rejected. I'm not necessarily surprised that, Israel and Tel Aviv wants to maintain some relationship with Moscow, would be my guess, and that's probably why they rejected this. But also, logistically, it could be a nightmare to try to bring Zelensky into the country at this time with so many security concerns. All right, I think that's all I have for you guys today. I'll have another show out on Friday. I had some other stories, but nothing too pressing. Of course, the war in Ukraine goes on, and we'll certainly be talking about that on the next show. But I'll just make all Israeli stuff on today's show. A lot of analysis on the Baptist hospital bombing, of course. And as always, I appreciate you all for tuning in. And again, have another show coming out on Friday.